So just a quick video, we'll talk about some of the common traps, some of the mistakes that companies make from my observation when it comes to OKRs and goal setting. Walk through some of them. You can even think of some of these as first principles around OKRs and how to actually go about implementing them properly, and how the best organizations and places I've seen do things like OKRs really, really well, how they go about it. So the first trap or mistake I see companies make all the time is to make OKRs cascade. So what do I mean by that is you can think of like, we have an organizational chart, right? So you can think of your org chart like this. And, just draw a bit of an org chart, and this is often what organizations look like. And then we have the teams down the bottom, multiple teams, right? And what we do is we try to make the OKRs fit our organizational chart. So what we do is we set, I'll change colors here. We'll set an OKR at the top. So often we'll have an objective and then we'll have key results. And what we then do is we make it cascade down like a rolling waterfall. And what ends up happening is we say, well, these key results become your objective for the next layer down. And then they set key results, and then those key results become the next layer down's objective, and then key results, and so forth down the ladder. And you can see how like this rolling kind of waterfall analogy, right? But the problem with this is there's many problems with this. And some of the problems are that there's very little autonomy and empowerment inside this, right? We're essentially standing there waiting for the person above us to tell us what our objective and key result is going to be. Now, this looks great from like a planning point of view. Like you can have this nice linear plan that says, the person above at the top sets their OKRs, then the next layer sets them, and then the next layer sets them. And this looks great from a planning point of view. But highly adaptable and agile organizations aren't really neat and nice and linear. They're a little bit more messy, but that enables them to have innovation and to adapt and to be more, have greater agility, right? So the other problem with this is that innovation and agility part. In order for me to be able to change plans, so if I'm down here and I want to change plans, I actually have to go up and get the OKR above me to change in order for me to change plans. Whereas if we have what I'll go through in a second, which is a more top-down, bottom-up approach, it enables me to be able to come up with my own plans and to be able to pivot and adapt in the moment and within my realm without having to escalate up and change things. Because here's the kicker off it as well. It's not just about changing that one level up, because they inherited theirs. It actually needs to go all the way back to the top in order to get that changed, so then you can make a change at the bottom. So you can see how this can stifle adaptability, because when we need to pivot and move, we actually need to run everything all the way back up to the top, and it needs to all change, and then it needs to run all the way back down, which is not great and not effective or efficient either. The other thing that happens here too is if I had a brilliant idea, and this can be at any level, I know I'm drawing it down the bottom, but it could be at any level. If I had a brilliant idea and a brilliant thing to work on and to do, I can't really work on that until the OKR above me aligns to that, right? Now, yes, we need to have strategic alignment. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But because I'm waiting to inherit OKRs and I don't really have a say in it when it's kind of coming top down, then I am basically just waiting, and trying to come up with new ideas is almost wasted, right? Like why bother come up with new ideas when I'm just waiting for to be told, which also makes it very hard to do any forward planning. Because again, I'm living my life one quarter at a time, because I don't know what my OKR is going to be next quarter, because I'm waiting to be told what my OKR is going to be, or at least I'm waiting to be told what my objective is. When we move away from this and we move towards a more top-down and bottom-up approach, things become a bit more messy, but enables us to do those things. The bottom, people at all levels of the organization can have a roadmap. They can have a vision and a plan and a view on where things are going to go in 3, 6, 12, 2, 3, 4 years time if they really want to. And that's fine, because we're not dictating to them what their OKRs are. They can have a view and then they can say, well, I was planning to do this next quarter. How does that align to your goals, to the person above? So how this then looks, to make it look differently, is the person at the top will set their OKRs, right? We still have that. But then the people in the next run of the ladder, rather than inheriting a key result as their OKR, they start to think, and the question becomes, what within your realm of responsibility, so what do you own? What slice of the organization do you own? Is it marketing? Is it whatever? Within the realm that you own, how can you help me as the person at the top or the CEO or whoever? How can you help the CEO achieve their goal? And then they will come up with their own OKRs, which align to that OKR. It doesn't cascade, it aligns. So they'll say, okay, if your target is this growth number, well, I own this part of the business and I think that we can attribute X% to that growth target. And we're going to do that by focusing in these areas. And I'm making these decisions because that's the business unit I own. And rather than you telling me what key result I have and I basically inherit, I'm then telling you how I'm going to help you achieve your goal. And this happens throughout the whole organization. So they'll set their OKR, and then the next layer down will do the same. They'll set their OKRs. You can have multiple OKRs, and they'll say, okay, based on what I own, this product or this suite of products, I can help you achieve your goal by doing these things. And again, it goes down to the bottom. So we have this, back and forth. It becomes kind of like ping pongs and yo-yos throughout the organization, and obviously back up again at the end. I know this is getting messy as a picture, but this is how it works. There's a lot more back and forth. Like, this is the goals that I want to chase. How are you going to help me realize those goals? And then they'll come back with what they think they should focus on as a business unit or area or group or team or whatever. And then there's a feedback cycle. The person above them, their boss, might change their OKRs based on that feedback. They might not. They might, and then they might give feedback back to their team to say, well, I'm not quite sure those OKRs are like where they need to be. Have you considered this? Have you considered that? And again, we're trying to strengthen the OKRs, not tell people what to do. And as a result, and this gets me into my second point, as a result, organizationally and with OKRs, and if you think about strategic alignment in general, it doesn't happen as like this picture perfect like ladder. If you think about the org chart, like we always think about it like a ladder. And we start to think about strategic alignment as this perfect ladder. Like we just need alignment top down, and it just needs to go top down, bottom up. And whilst that's true, like I'm not saying that we don't want strategic alignment top down. Strategic alignment in an organization, in my experience, especially when we start doing OKRs and stuff too, is more like a constellation of stars. So if you think about it this way, you start to have like these stars and then like little clusters of stars. And these clusters of stars often represent a business unit and their teams, right? And then in the center, we have the C-suite or the organization, which is, that's what everybody is trying to drive towards and attribute towards. And then what we end up having is, again, like a constellation, right, of stars. And the reason why I say it's a constellation too, and not a ladder, is because it's not as picture perfect again as this top down, because we might have a product over here, let's say a product over there, and that product might need to align with another product's OKRs that is not in their business unit, right? It might be another part of the organization. A very simple example of this is like sales and marketing. Sales and marketing often sit outside, and whatever we do on product needs to align with sales and marketing. Sales and marketing will have their own OKRs, they'll have their own strategy, they'll have their own plans, but my product needs to align with theirs, and vice versa. They need to align with me as the person who owns that product, right? So we can't have this ladder construct anymore, because a ladder construct would ignore that. We again work in silos. I just worry about the fact that I need to align to the level above me. And this is also another reason why that kind of top-down approach breaks down, because when we allow it to just go top-down, we create silos and we forget those types of impact. And yes, whilst we all line back up to the top, we miss out on these opportunities to create strategic alignment across the organization, not just vertically, right? So we also want it horizontally. And then equally as well, this enables like even teams within the same business unit to again, or department to again align between themselves. This also does some other things that starts to get a bit advanced, and it might break your brain a little bit, but I'm just going to touch on it, which is that it also enables you to have a, OKR, a strategy, a plan, a thing here, and have that not necessarily aligned directly to their business unit, but they might align directly to the organization's OKR and the top. And we can start to skip levels because we're not thinking about the organization as like a ladder anymore, as levels. We start to think about the organization as more like a constellation of stars, which means that we could have an OKR here that arguably actually best aligns to our North Star as an organization. And whilst it does align here, it's loosely aligned. And rather than trying to, again, do square peg and round hole and make it align, we can say, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's a strategic imperative for us as an organization. And it's okay that it just aligns straight to the organization's goals at the top. And there's nothing wrong with that. We can do that. We can get away with that. It's okay. And this again enables that adaptability, that flexibility in the organization. And again, that is going to drive greater innovation and agility. So think of your organization, and at least strategic alignment, I should just say. Don't think of it like a ladder. Think of it like a constellation of stars. So that's kind of like first principle number 2. In regards to definitely strategic alignment and how to cultivate that strategic alignment. The next thing I have that I want to just chat about in terms of OKRs is that they don't exist in a vacuum, right? So, if we go back up here, if I was to take any one of these, I'll use a different color, any one of these, it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. Obviously, there's context of the OKRs up and down, but there's also context in terms of why did we pick that OKR? What's next? If we achieve that, what is it building towards? What's that higher level, things like vision and, what are we going to work on next? And who do we target? And what data drove us to actually decide on those OKRs? What are our competitors doing? All those other types of things. And all of this is strategy. So what I mean by this is your OKRs don't exist in a vacuum. They are a representation or a model of your strategy. So how does that work? Well, you need to still have a strategy. Your OKRs can't just be plucked out of the air. They're not something that you just pick, right? They need to be informed by data, and they need to be actual strategic choices as an organization. We are going to focus on these objectives, and we're going to measure progress by these key results. Great. Why did you choose them? How does that help us forward ourselves as an organization? What data supports that, et cetera, et cetera. This is all strategy. So your OKRs become a model of your strategy because they essentially represent levers that you have strategically chosen to pull, and you're going to then use to measure progress towards realizing your strategy. So I'll start to make this tangible for you. Let's say that you have an overarching goal that's a growth goal, right? Like let's say we want to, we want to get annual recurring revenue, a certain percentage, $20 million or whatever it needs to be, right? That's your overarching, higher level goal. That's kind of at the top, company level or department level or something like that. You then own a product within that. You then start to look at, well, what do I know about my customers with the product? What do I know about the product health in general? Looking at competitors, doing research, discovery, all that type of stuff. And you're pulling data points to think about, well, how do we continue to grow this product in a way that it supports that higher goal, right? So you then formulate a strategy off the back of it to say, we're going to target these people, these target market, and we're going to solve these specific needs of theirs. And if we can do that, we believe that these represent a new market for us, which when we look at competitors is untapped, so no competitors are really playing in that space too much, which presents an opportunity for us to grow, right? But this is all strategy. You have looked at it, you've chosen where you're going to play, how you're going to win, why you're going to do that, all those types of things. From there, you start to look at, well, how do I then measure that? And that is really where your OKRs come into. I need to start to turn this into OKRs in the sense of measuring my progress towards that. So we're going to focus on these people and these needs. Well, how about I can have some task success type metrics on that? I can start to look at this market as a market share percentage, right? I can look at acquisition in that space, all those types of things. I can look at retention, those types of things. And this is important because all this context, we can't forget about it. This is all really important context for our teams and our people to get across and to understand that, hey, we've picked these OKRs for these reasons. If I'm measuring, task success here, it's not because I'm not focused on, market share and growth and dollars. I'm just focused on it for now because we need to find product market fit first. Again, strategy, right? We need to find product market fit first. And then once we have that, then we can start to focus on acquisition and growth. So yes, our OKR today is focused here, but our OKR in the future might be focused over here. And if you have all this context, people can see that, they can understand that, they can acknowledge it, you can talk about it, and we can have greater alignment, not just within like a quarter or a short period of time, but long-term as well. Another example of this, just to make this and also, again, tangible in like how do we measure things. Again, it's a very simple one. I'm making this really simple. So it's a bad example in the sense that it's too simplified, but hopefully it illustrates the point. You could have a growth target, right? Or growth objective. Now you can achieve that by acquiring new people, as we're just talking about. But maybe you looked at the product, maybe you looked at your data, you talked to your customers, and really you don't have too much of an acquisition problem. You actually got a retention problem or a churn problem. This is what I often call the leak-in bucket. So you can visualize a metaphorical bucket and customers are coming in or new customers are coming in. And then essentially you've got like a leak at the bottom, which is your churn. Now, if you've got a really big hole in the bottom of your bucket and your churn is really high, throwing more people into your bucket might not be the best strategy. So whilst yes, you could set an OKR up here that's all about acquisition numbers, maybe, again, strategy and the context, maybe our OKR actually needs to be down here first. We need to resolve churn. So we might be like reduce churn by X%, increase retention by X%, whatever. And then once we've solved that, then we can move on to that acquisition number again. Again, churn still aligns to that growth kind of target, right? I can help you achieve that by just minimizing, like we can grow the user base by minimizing churn. We can also grow it by adding more customers. But again, strategy, context, and what data drove you to make those decisions and why we making those decisions. You can't just have an OKR off by itself because then we don't have answers to any of those questions, right? Like, why are we doing it? What's next? Who are we doing it for? All those types of things. How do we get to these numbers? Answering all those questions is absolutely pertinent in organizations. And I definitely have seen my fair share of organizations fall into the trap of not having these types of things. And they just have, OKRs, and people don't understand the OKRs. They don't know why we're doing the OKR. And that, again, is going to be detrimental to the organization because we need to know why we're doing things. Again, that's going to enable people and give people in the organization the tools and the information to be able to make smart decisions. It's going to create better clarity in the organization, ultimately going to help us be able to execute better and have greater impact over the long term. Now, this touches on one of my next points, which is that, and if you do strategy really well, you will actually cover this, but I'll make this really basic because this is a common trap as well. When you think about any business, so any business really exists through, or business and product can get distilled down to something as basic as value exchange. So the way value exchange works is a company exists to build a product that people that give value to people. So we give value to people, often via the product, often by solving their problems and meeting their needs. People then give us value back as an organization, which is often in the term of dollars. Not always in the term of dollars. You don't always get paid for your products. Could be data, could be other things. It could be, acquiring customers and then they buy other products, and then that would then get us money and revenue. But then that money enables us to sustain the company, right? And be able to employ people in order to work on that product. And then the kind of flywheel kind of continues from there. But that is value exchange, and that is a business and product at its absolute most fundamental. So why am I talking about this? Well, because companies can fall into the trap, I've seen this too often, where they are too focused on the business and themselves. And they set OKRs that are solely focused on the business. Things like growth targets, growth revenues, costs, drive down costs, increase revenue, increase customers, do this, do that, and it's all internally focused, right? Which is fine. We need to think about the business impact that we want. Again, we need to complete this flywheel. This is still an important part of the whole picture. But if we only focus on these things, we can fall into the trap of the whole build it and they will come. We become too insular. We look at ourselves, we set our own targets and our own goals, and then we build a whole bunch of stuff and do a whole bunch of stuff in the hope that it's going to achieve that. But we have completely forgotten and neglected this side of the fence. And without any insight and without any measurements against this side of the fence, then the whole thing fails. You might have success in the short term, but it will fail in the long term. So we also have the customer, or the market, or your users, whatever term you want to use here. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are focusing in this intersect, right? So this intersect is super important. This is where we need to be thinking about both. What business impact do we want to have? And then what customer impact outcomes align with that business outcome? And we need to target that. That is where good product is going to happen. That is what good OKRs look like. Good OKRs consider both the business and the customer. It's not just the business thing, and it's not just the customer thing, because if it was just a customer thing, we'll just give free money and free products out to our customers, right? But if it's just a business thing, then we'll charge for everything. We'll make our fees really, really expensive and make life a nightmare for our customers. We need to focus in this center. So OKRs should have both customer impact and business impact. We need to be thinking about both, and we need to be, making sure we're balancing both of them. So don't become too insular. Need to be able to see your customers in your OKRs. Need to be able to see the business as well. Like, you need both. It's really the moral of the story there. Which also often means we're starting to think about things across different time horizons. Now, what do I mean by that? Often measuring the customer side of the fence often happens earlier than the business side. So often we give value to our customers, and then it takes some time to realize that impact back to the business. What we refer to those things as is leading versus lagging indicators. And the analogy that I often use is, let's say we want some lemons to make, lemonade, let's just say, right? And that's what we ultimately want to have one day. Let's say we decide to plant some seeds, right? Planting seeds and turning into a tree where we would be able to harvest lemons is quite a long process. This could be a year, 2 years longer before we realize and actually have lemons. So if our OKR and our measure was up here and it was like, X number of lemons, let's say 10 lemons, right? It could take us 12, 18, 24 months before we even realize that OKR, which means we planted seeds and then we wait 18 months and then we come back and we look, has a tree grown? And surprise, surprise, there's no tree. And we think, oh, we failed. Now it's time to pivot, right? That's a long time to get feedback that what we did is not working and not achieving our goals. So what can we do instead? Well, we can measure progress as we go. We could plant seeds and we could measure how many of those seeds actually germinated into something. We could then start to look at the growth rate, right? So as it starts to turn into a bush, we could maybe measure how quickly it's growing and spurring up. We could then measure other things, right? Like the health of the tree. Does it look like it's going to actually give us what we hope it's going to give us? Those types of things. But what we're doing is we're setting measures and key results and OKRs along the full time horizon. And what this, again, I mentioned it before, gets referred to is this is leading indicators and this is lagging. So we need both. We need the leading and the lagging indicators. If we focus just on the lagging indicators, it will take us a very long time to get any feedback to know whether our OKRs are working or not. Equally, if we just focus on the leading indicators, we can lose sight of the lagging indicator, because there's also an argument here of, well, how else might we solve getting lemons? Maybe we don't need a lemon tree. Maybe we could do something else. So these two things need to be balanced, because if a team is just focused on planting seeds and then measuring the growth of it, and they don't know why they're doing it and where that's contributing to and what's that larger picture and what's that longer term lagging business impact that we hope to have, then we just get fixated on that quarter by quarter by quarter, and we just keep doing and doing and doing. And there's no opportunity to get your head above the trees and to say, well, why are we planting a tree? Is it like maybe we could do something else? We could go buy some lemons, right? We could partner with, a lemon farmer to be able to get a good deal on the lemons that we need to have on a regular basis. But again, without that lag in, we miss that. And then equally, without the lead in, we could wait 18 months and have no lemon tree and no lemons. And that's a long time to find out that the stuff that you're working on is not working. Equally, we might also, plant seeds and maybe we tried to plant seeds 3 times and every time it failed. This could be an indication at that point in time to then pivot and to say, well, maybe we just suck at growing lemon trees. Maybe we should just change tactic and to do something else. But again, without that lead-in metrics and indicators, you won't know, or you won't have any feedback in order to be able to make that decision and pivot and adapt. Which brings me to my second last point, and that is that OKRs, outcomes, one of the hard things with outcomes is we don't have full control over it. If I planted lemon seeds and my yard flooded or my farm flooded, and that's just a bad weather event, like I might not have known that was going to happen, right? So just because that happened doesn't mean I failed per se, right? I did all the right things. I checked the soil level, I fertilized it, I watered it, I planted the seeds, everything like that. I might have done everything correctly, but I still didn't realize that outcome at the end of the day. And this could be because of things outside of your control. Now, this doesn't mean it's a get out of jail free card. Don't use this as an excuse for not hitting your outcomes. But it's something that we need to acknowledge, that outcomes aren't completely in our control. There are external factors that are going to influence it. Economical factors, interest rates, all those types of things. That doesn't mean we shouldn't focus on the outcomes. The outcome is still the outcome. That is still what we want to achieve. We still want lemons. We still want to focus on that and try to achieve it. It doesn't make the goal any less worthy. But what it does is we need to acknowledge that, hey, if at the end of the quarter, we haven't realized that if it flooded and my lemon trees all died, or we got a cyclone or something like that, that's just bad luck. And we need to look at it through that lens of, what can we learn from this? Is it anything that we did that we could do better next time? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. And that's okay. And that also means that if you're not hitting your OKRs all the time, that's also okay. Because those unexpected events can happen and they can influence us. And then as a result, we miss out on it. But that's, again, it's okay that we missed out on it. It doesn't change the goal. We just try again. Let's clean the field. Let's plant the seeds again. Let's do what we did last time, because we did things right. Maybe we do have some learnings. We can tweak things, but we couldn't have stopped a cyclone, right? Which brings me into my last point, which is that a big anti-pattern and a big no-no is tying your OKRs to people's performance indicators. This becomes very hard or very bad to do because of that reason. Because we don't have full control over it, you can essentially punish people like, hey, you're not getting your bonus this year, or you're not getting promoted because, by the way, a cyclone came through and destroyed all your lemon trees. That's not their fault. So we need to look at different things in order to measure people's performance and to work those types of things out if your organization wants to do that. But those things are not outcomes. We need to separate those two things. Yes, over time, some people, the better people, should hit more outcomes than others, but it's so contextual and it's so tied to external factors that it is not fair, and it's generally an anti-pattern to tie those two things together. Because guess what's going to happen when you tie those two things together? People are going to then not set worthy and good outcomes. They're going to set more outputs as outcomes as their OKRs because they have control over that. Why would I have a key result about getting X number of lemons when I don't have full control over how fast that tree's going to grow, when it's going to grow, and whether a cyclone's going to happen? I'll probably end up setting an OKR that's a really bad OKR. It'll be something like plant 5 lemon trees. I'll plant them, tick that off, happy days. But we know that just planting trees, which is an output, is not an outcome, right? We need to realize those benefits from those trees. That is the ultimate outcome. So it can drive bad behaviors in the organization. It's just generally a bad thing to do. So that's my last point to kind of just touch on and to leave on. But that's really it. I recognize I covered a lot of ground, so I might just summarize here. Think of your organization more as a constellation and not as a ladder, which means strategic alignment can happen multi-directional. It's not just a bi-directional up and down, it's multi-directional, which also means that our OKRs shouldn't cascade. Don't make them cascade, just make them align. They need to align to each other's and have cohesion. They don't cascade down in the organization. Cascades, OKRs also don't exist in a vacuum. They have strategy behind them. They are really a model and a representation of your strategy. We need to have this information and context that sits behind it so we can make informed decisions, which means that we need to consider both customer and business impact and not just one or the other. And we need to consider both leading and lagging indicators. And we don't have full control over our outcomes. That is part of it. That is the nature of outcomes, which means we shouldn't tie them to people's performance. It's really that at the end of the day. So hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully that covers a lot of ground around OKRs, strategic alignment, those types of things. Like I said, you can think of this in just terms of goal setting in general, but in particular OKRs, common traps, some first principles around them. So hopefully that's helpful and useful. And if you want to learn more about product, check out productpathways.com. We have online courses, self-paced courses, and a whole bunch of free tools, guides, templates for you to use. So plenty of great resources there. So check it out.